First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk.
My pleasure, Tom.
Right out of the box, I'm very interested about you growing up as a kid. Like, where was it, and what kind of a kid were you, and how did that feed into what you do now?
Wow.
I know.
My course was rather predetermined. And if you would look back now and look at the details of my birth and my childhood, it's pretty predictable the path that I took. For me, it was a cloud of ambiguity, but the course is pretty well predicted. You could think of the track as step by step of trying to resolve the issues that I encountered when I was a kid. So as that slowly unfolds, it'll be readily obvious. And I wish I weren't so predictable. My wife certainly wishes I wasn't as predictable as I am. But my childhood, I'm from Pennsylvania. I was born in central South Pennsylvania, actually in Hershey Hospital, which may account for my sugar allergy. But my earliest memory of my family nucleus was actually my father beating my mother. He had, from my understanding, because it was a few years earlier, but he had come back from the Korean War in the Army, and our family started to disintegrate. The violence and abuse and emotional problems in the family began when he got back. Well, my mother was pretty much the provider while he was off, and all the rage that came when he came home infected, or I should say, infiltrated the rest of the family, and we started to rapidly dissolve until my parents got a divorce. I still can see every detail of that first memory of mine. It was pretty much imprinted, and I hated him for it. I didn't understand, of course, what was going on when you're a 4-year-old. You only understand the violence and the direction it's headed, and it was at my mother when I was a child.
And there's no explaining to a child PTSD or any of that other stuff.
And it wasn't even something that was comprehended back then.
Right.
So that influenced the rest of my career. If I look back on one pivotal point, it's that earliest memory in everything that I've done up until that point was to solve that puzzle of what happened. And of course, with the divorce in that era, this was in the steel era of Pennsylvania when all of the steel foundries were in their prime. My mother had to provide for 4 kids because my father had threatened to take everything and the children if she didn't sign over all of the assets, and she didn't know. She didn't know, so she signed over all of the assets, and he took the ranch, and literally. And we were in a trailer court, the 4 of us, and my oldest sister had already left the house, and that's when the problems started to quickly deteriorate. I first was diagnosed with learning disabilities in 1st grade. My learning disabilities slowly grew more and more severe, which is why I will sometimes sound as dramatic as William Shatner. That's actually careful accessing of words. It's not for dramatic pause, and I'm not attempting to sound the way I do. If I get fatigued, when I get fatigued, when I run low on calories, and when I'm not recovering from my stress levels of the projects I do, then I quickly turn to Klingon. It's unintelligible what I say or what I write. But it was mirror writing when I was a kid. And back then, you had 2 classes. You had mainstream population and you had a retarded class. It was
right.
So I was quickly put in the trash can there because everything I wrote came out in the mirror. And it wasn't until years later that the dyslexia research had begun. But the social ostracization from the learning disabilities, from the single-parent trailer court upbringing, not to my mother's fault at all. I mean, she worked 2 full-time jobs and dealt with all of that on her own and provided for us. But I also imported a lot of her seething injury, her emotional injury from my father, which I believe she still carries. I believe that she has not and cannot heal at this point in her life, and she's told me she's too old to change. And maybe and that's the biggest tragedy in her life, that her victories are going unnoticed to her.
Wow.
So this being socially ostracized led to poor diet, and of course being on my own basically with a mother who worked 2 full-time jobs. I ate myself crazy, I became an obese child. And you can see the story starting to spawn here.
Yeah.
It led to fights at school. So basically, I took the victimized posture and the victim attitude and mindset into the school atmosphere. And as I got older, the violence grew more heavily fortified. So
that aspect is blood in the water in high school. You know.
Right. I didn't know that I was accountable for what was happening, but I did know that I was bringing it on myself somehow. How was I on their radar? And I learned to fight. Unfortunately, I didn't want to. I had to, because if I tried to leave the violence, then they'd find me and I'd get it much worse later. If I fought back, and I did, when I wasn't expecting it, they would come either well armed or in greater numbers. And if I tried to go to the authorities, then
right.
Yeah. So quickly, with the learning disabilities, the obesity, the carried weight of victimization, I thought I was the problem. And so wherever I went, I took the problem with me. I didn't know until I was at junior high school that I was institutionalized by my mother. She put me in a children's psychiatric hospital. She told me she was taking me to the dentist, to a new dentist. It was a huge office with dormitories.
Wow.
And the door locked behind me, and I could still see her through that reinforced glass square just above my eye height as she was crying. I'm like, what's going on? Shouldn't you be in here with me? I don't know how to put this paperwork. So being institutionalized was one of the key points in my childhood of realizing, okay, I can't fight this, so I've got to find a way to beat this. I've got to find a way. I've got to find out what they want to hear that will allow me to escape my situation. So it wasn't an accurate decision, but it was an effective one. I didn't know what the problem was, but I had set myself upon taking action and emancipating myself from the problem. So I learned what they wanted to say. It was very didactic, and any psychiatric hospital that carpets their rooms wall to wall should be shut down. Rubber rooms, I get. But carpeted rooms, I have never had so much rug burn in my life.
Yeah.
So, Thorazine aside, once I was able to remove myself from that situation, I learned their answers, I took their tests, and I eventually passed them. And the teachers weren't supposed to know where I was when they reinserted me into mainstream population, only the administration. And that was a confidential agreement. That lasted about a week before it got to teachers, and another couple of weeks before it leaked its way out into the student body. There weren't lawsuits as we know of them now when everything is WikiLeaked. So the violence came back 100-fold. And I remember walking down the hall bloodied and trying to make my way to the principal's office. And you have to understand the level of apathy that these teachers had to. I don't blame them anymore. They had to adopt a level of apathy because of the consistent repeating problems that they had with this one individual, and they had no solutions, no education, no skills, no government support, nothing. They didn't know how to deal with me. They only knew that it was a problem. So I remember walking down the hall, and it was a crystallized epiphany for me that I need to change the way I walk, and I need to change the way I talk. My movement, and for me, I equated my shape with movement. There wasn't the stigma about obesity back then. It wasn't even a popularized term. You were just fat or not.
Right.
And for me,
maybe husky.
Husky.
Right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that phrase burned into my brain, and I didn't realize that I had made a very interesting sociological observation, that the words that we choose and how we express ourselves and the postures that we adopt are what remove us from situations, propel us through challenges, or provide us with solutions. I didn't understand it, as a preteen or as a early teen, but that was probably the best thought I've ever had in my life. And it influenced every book I've done, every video that I've produced since. So, in seeking to do that, I wasn't interested in learning to fight. I was interested in learning how to stop fighting. How do I end this violence? Then I went from this is pre-Karate Kid era, so there weren't martial arts schools on every block from every culture. Like there is now. I mean, I have my kids can go to Aikido, to Muay Thai. They can go down the street and do capoeira. I mean, every culture is in my city. But back then, you had one or two options.
Right.
So I had to venture farther and farther out in order to find instructors, and I was so dissatisfied when I arrived in their classes because they were like, no, one punch, one kill. We will teach you how to destroy an attacker. I'm like, great. Yeah. I'm going to get my butt whooped the next day.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah. And so that all of the ego and bravado didn't latch on to me. I wasn't quite impressed as a child, and I got myself booted out of a lot of martial arts schools because I would ask uncomfortable questions of the instructor. As a young teenager, you don't question the sensei.
Right.
But I'm American, and I have no problem with that. So,
before we move on, I just want to ask really quickly, with what you had said about your dad, because your situation is very similar, somewhat similar to my own. And I always felt like my dad, even though my dad was sort of, and pardon the vernacular, but kind of a shithead, it taught me, if not what a man should be, what a man shouldn't be.
Oh yeah.
Does that vaguely sound familiar at all?
For my childhood, I have a longer story where that chapter came full circle with my dad. I'm first of all, let me say that when it comes to my wife and I and us parenting, I know what not to do. I don't know how to parent. She does. I know how not to parent. So I kind of hang out and play with my kids. And then when I come to a situation with regards to parental boundaries or nurturing, I have to default to her. Right. I don't have the handbook. So, yes, I know exactly what I think you're saying. But I need to jump forward about 30 years to when, it's going to sound very strange, to when I was invited to Israel to train their special forces in one of their secret training camps. Mm-hmm. And it's almost laughable. I'm not trying to be Tom Clancy, but for me to go there had nothing to do with the mystique of the martial art or the combatives or the special operations units. It was that the one colonel took me to this place where people go on pilgrimages to go into the baptismal waters of the River Jordan. He took it there as a special treat for training their group. And while I was there, there was this little shop, not like a shop like we know it, but more like a stand of these carved wooden camels. When I was a teenager, I got to see my father once. I was 14, and it was an Easter dinner, and all of the kids got together and they went to see him. I had no relationship with him, and I had imported my mother's rage toward him. So I didn't go to any of those events. They were seasonal events. But I went to this one, and he had just gotten back from a pilgrimage to Jerusalem with his new wife that he had met on the plane. He was the treasurer of his church, which he had joined and became very immersed in his religion. And he gave me this gift as a 13 or 14. I'm sorry, I can't remember. It was before I went into the hospital. And it was a carved wooden camel from Israel. You have to understand, I'm a teenage boy. So I'm thinking, wow, thanks a lot. You gave me a camel. Awesome. But I kept it. And something happened in all my travels that I lost it. And it was pretty heart-wrenching because it's the only thing I had from my father. Even though at the time it didn't seem like a significant gift. It was the only thing I had. And when I was in Israel and I saw the same exact camel with the same exact print and carving and position, I just broke down.
Wow. Because
I had come to the point where he went to heal himself from the war wounds that he had experienced emotionally and psychically. The same exact spot. And that shut that part of my life. It was complete. And it wasn't that I forgave him, because there's nothing to forgive. That was just a predictable pattern of behavior that anyone without any support experiencing what he did would undergo.
Right.
Why would you hate a dog for snapping at you when you put your hand through its fence that it's protecting?
Right.
It's just being a dog. Good job protecting your lawn.
Well, I think it may come down to not condoning the action, but maybe understanding it.
Right. Oh, I don't think I wouldn't endorse it.
Right.
But I certainly don't. I no longer had the weight of internal violence. And that resolved all of that problem for me. So I came to understand him, and I from that point backwards, I looked upon all of the training I received in different countries and all of the education that I had somehow self-willed into existence. As I had to, that was interdisciplinary. At the time, there was no such thing as stress physiology.
Right.
So I had to pull from different disciplines. And stress physiology itself is still not a sufficient discipline, expansive discipline to accommodate what the work that I do is. It can't be defined by stress physiology because there's a lot more involved. It's not just an internal experience, it's an external relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So my martial art experience is what I quickly took part in. I didn't know at the time, but it was to explore how to, like I said, stop fighting, but how to manage. When I saw a martial art master, I wasn't looking at the lethality of their movements. I was looking at how freaking peaceful they seemed in the middle of a storm.
So you had mentioned being in the hospital. Is that
a mental hospital, not a physical hospital?
Oh, okay.
The psychiatric ward of Children's Hospital in Pennsylvania.
But were there other things going on at the time?
Yes, but not for which I was hospitalized. Back then, there was no solution to severe learning disabilities, so the mental hospital was the last step.
Right.
And it was there that that I had decided to take steps to change my situation. Before then, I had accepted that this was my lot in life, and that this is what I needed to suffer. So I tried to find escape from my situation rather than addressing it. At that point, I realized there was no escape because it was literally I was in prison.
Right.
So I found the will inside me to solve it somehow. Concordant with that, I had developed a joint disease which doctors at the time didn't understand. They just had a drop bucket for it called osteochondrosis, which basically means my connective tissue wouldn't adhere to my rapidly growing growth plates. I outstripped my body's ability to keep its tensegrity. So every night I was wrapped in a corset of agony. Every time I would do something athletic, my mother would have to stay awake all night rubbing liniment on my joints. So that painful experience prevented me from using conventional athletics as an outlet. I needed an alternative movement modality that would allow me to heal my body and change my fitness. My mother was very ingenious and was above nothing, as she would be fond of saying. So she started researching not just physical methods, but also mental methods. My dyscalculia, my inability. Well, so I shouldn't say my inability because I love statistics now. But at the time, mathematics was my bugbear. She had found something called Chisenbop, which is Korean finger counting. I used my kinesthetic dominance to shore up the non-devotion of real estate in my brain to mathematics. And this digitation connected with mathematics accelerated or caught me up to the conventional student. It was an example, but not the only solution. She also helped me find total physical response, which was a way of connecting movement to language. By bonding movements or anchoring movements, we came to later use the term in NLP, anchoring movement to language, I was able to re-access speech skills and refine the ability to think in context of words rather than feelings and expressions through these movement modalities that my mother found and began for me. And that it was her behavior that was a catalyst for me thinking, okay, there must be some type of method out there that will help me with this problem. That's a particular line of thought. I didn't know that it would become a lifestyle behavior. There has to be a strategy, a tactic, a methodology, a discipline that can address this problem I've encountered. I had quickly, or perhaps gradually, I don't remember because of how time compressed my childhood was. There was a transition in thought between I can't do this, I'm broken, I'm flawed, I'm defected, I'm retarded, to there must be a way for me to get around this. And I remember that thought developing in the hospital of I'm going to find a way to answer the questions in the way they want so I can get the hell out of here. To being in school and the violence restarting and me thinking, okay, I could get out of that hospital. I just need to change the way I think, the way I talk, and the way I walk, the way I move. If I can change those things and continue to change those things, I can remove myself from this situation and become invisible to the violence. How can that led to my martial art experience as an alternate movement methodology. I wanted violence to stop, so I wasn't interested in learning how to fight. I wanted to develop different movement patterns and different thought patterns, which I knew were bonded together because of my genetic makeup, my disabilities.
Right.
And I set myself upon that path. Now, you know, the sad part about this story is it seems very clear when I recount it. Like, this is what this kid had it together. No, man.
Yeah.
I was such a train wreck. I hurt so many people along the way. I was so ignorant of my own process. I didn't know it was a process. It was more stumbling in the dark and crawling and clawing at a pinhole of hope that I saw far away. So it sounds all logical for me because I've processed it and I know this is why this happened. But we're talking about the 2% of clarity. The other 98% was a bunch of juvenile delinquency.
Right. Now, but a lot of times people that have experienced the challenges that you have find their way to drugs and alcohol. Was that not an option for you, or is that not something that you ever were investigating?
2 problems. 1, I was broke. If I had money, it would have been a different issue. Now,
right.
For what I could afford, I attempted to experiment. And there's not much that you can purchase on a blue-collar diet. But what I did broke my brain. It's very difficult for a lot of people. It was even difficult for my wife to understand sometimes. I mean, she knows me better than anyone else. It's been 16 years together. So if I have 2 or 3 glasses of wine, I'm done.
Right.
It's not that I'm drunk. It's that I cannot think. I cannot function. All of my thought processes are conscious and deliberate. They may be automated, but without conscious application and without fortifying them with proper nutrition and proper movement in order to deliver the nutrition throughout my body, I can't think straight. Drugs break my brain. And I get into very frightening feedback loops. I can describe it as this. Let's say I went to a concert as a kid and happened to get a contact high from the haze above the audience.
Sure.
Okay? So I have plausible deniability. So, okay, I work with federal law enforcement, man. So,
I'm down.
Okay. So in that contact high, I'm walking and I decide it's time to go. I need to go find my car. I don't remember where my car is. Where are my car keys? They must have been in my pocket. What was I looking for in my pocket? I need to get out of here. Where's my car?
Right.
Where are my car keys? They must be in my pocket. I was just trying to think about something, and that loop will continue. And it's by definition a feedback loop. I'm stuck in Groundhog Day and not able to interrupt the cycle. There's no pattern interrupt for me because the substance has prevented me from consciously clearing the path of a sequence of thoughts. So, man, I tried, but I disappear. My personhood is gone because I'm a mostly conscious individual. My character is deliberate. You interrupt that, and I'm nothing. Now, you can get metaphysical about it, and you would say that maybe I have an advantage of Buddhism, but the reality is that I gravitated towards that lifestyle because my wiring gives me an advantage for developing strategies and tactics because if I have to live a conscious lifestyle, then I'm aware of most of what's going on in my head.
Right.
So when something comes into my head and it's a problem, it causes cognitive dissonance with the experience that I want to happen, then I look at that and say, okay, this program needs to be removed, changed, or overwritten.
Mm-hmm.
So that for me, it ended up being an advantage. But the drugs can't happen, and it's not just drugs for me. The sugar has the same biochemical signature at a cellular level as cocaine.
Wow.
And I thought this sugar allergy was, that some people are predisposed to becoming fat or obese or firing on fast-burning fuels. No. For me, it has a dangerous implication. It erodes my character. It erodes my personality. I'm not able to think straight. I lose my productivity. My emotions dissolve. I become apathetic. And not just sugars, because if you look at the chemistry that's involved, grain impacts me the same way.
Wow.
Then you look at the sugars in milk. Milk impacts me that way. Then you look at the farther reaching implication of all simple carbs. Fast-burning fuels have the same impact upon me mentally as any other substance that would be abused. So my diet, the way I evolved my nutrition, was not because I wanted to look great. It wasn't even because I wanted to be a great athlete. It's because I needed to think clearly.
I meet a lot of jiu-jitsu players, and a lot of them smoke pot.
If you look at good jiu-jitsu is responsive rather than reactive.
Right.
So if you want to be aware of what's happening and respond to it in real time, then for most people who have automatic mental functions that afflict them, they're not aware of their conscious processes. They just chatter on and on and on and on and on and on, and they're afflicted by memes throughout the day. They're not aware of why they're doing what. Why are you rattling your leg right now? Why are you stomping as you're walking? Why are you humming a song? All of these things are white noise to people's movement. They don't realize it has a direct correlation to physical activity. So the marijuana that they use can make dormant all of that forebrain mental chatter so they can actually be kinesthetically accessed to an opponent. For me, it's not a problem. I'm already clinically retarded. I can grapple very well because I don't have any mental chatter.
Yeah.
What you see is what you get with me. So I gravitated towards grappling. Striking was not one from a strategic standpoint. I wasn't interested in striking. I wanted to make what happened invisible so that I wouldn't incur greater escalation. So naturally, I gravitated towards grappling, and the ultimate expression of that is obviously jiu-jitsu. For me, I was looking for a solution, and for me, your enemy's enemy is your friend. I didn't understand at the time what was going on in my life. I just castigated it as, okay, well, this country doesn't like me. So when you see this country reacting so territorially towards another, you would look at it, why? What's going on? For me, it was the Soviet Union at the time. Mm-hmm. Why is there such a resistance towards this other nation? I started research. That led me to a long path of eventually studying their martial art, their national martial art. And going over there, becoming the first American to post-perestroika to go behind the Iron Curtain and formally intern and study their form of combatives, which just so happened to be a physical expression of stress physiology, which they called psychophysiology. It was a massive think tank of researchers, scientists, doctors, Olympic trainers, and special forces trainers. They, in a very odd story, happened to, at the same time, Putin was trying to come into office, and he was prime minister at the time. This is post-perestroika. So he wanted to develop cultural understanding with the West. If he had sympathy from the West, then he would get electoral support. So he developed a lot of cultural programs, including an outreach program of sharing Russian martial art, which is what they called it, with the world. So they went out and they researched and sought out representatives from each country in the West to come over there and formally intern. None of this was overt. It's not like I searched it on the internet. This is just, it's a convoluted story. But I ended up being the one that they elected to take over there. I remember when they told me, because they had interviewed 400 athletes, and I asked the general, like, why did you choose me? I mean, look at these athletes. And because they were superior specimens, obviously. I mean, it doesn't matter what your competitive level is. You know when an athlete is in better conditioning.
Right.
But he said it was because of the way I walked. What are you talking about? And of course, and instantly I start thinking about what happened to me in junior high school and what my self-dialogue was. And he said, the way you move is obviously blue blood. There's some type of royalty in your history. And only that legacy will be able to truly understand our martial art. I'm like, what in the world are you talking about? This was all way over my head. So first of all, my family comes from the village of Sonnon in Bavaria, Germany. And they were merchants. There was nothing. They go farther back, and it was the Sonnensteins. They were Jewish merchants who traveled from Austria back up to this Bavaria trail, and eventually bought the land from Lord Falkenstein, the land baron. So there's nothing royal about me. I knew that was not true. And he said, no, you're missing it somewhere. There's no way you can move like that and not be of royal descent. What? It was beyond my comprehension, beyond their comprehension, American culture at the time. And American culture is very much, if I want to change my stratum that I'm in, I can change my behavioral patterns and step above it. That's a very American sentiment. And I hadn't known that was a cultural meme that I had learned and adopted. I had just thought, well, if I want to change my situation, I just do. But for them, you at the time, they thought you're dedicated to the strata that you're born into. So when from an anthropological standpoint, it was very interesting to me about movement. For them, movement determines what your lineage was. And going over there, learning their science of stress physiology, because it was very pragmatic. They had no cultural baggage. They just wanted to learn what was effective for the nation, of empowering every individual to be a strong Soviet comrade. So they invested millions and millions of rubles in all of this research. For them, sport was a political platform. I got privy to that, and when I came, I remember an interview in Moscow. It was a live interview, and the interviewer, and there's their generals in the audience, and he said to me, "So you will take the Russian secrets back to America and give away for free? You will steal what we have learned." And I know I'm butchering the accent, but I looked at him, I'm like, well, yeah, that's why I'm here. And it was like a pin could drop in the room, man. My coach, the general, looked over at me, and he was just seething because I was destroying the what I didn't understand at the time is that there was huge political opposition to what they were doing, this cultural sharing program of trying to expose the West to their indigenous and their national programs, and this cultural program of which I was one of. There were many programs that they developed to outreach to the West. The martial art program was just one of them. There were many political parties that opposed it, especially the old communists, who wanted to scuttle it in order to embarrass Putin. And one of the ways to do that is to make a mockery of the American who was there, who just happens to be me, completely clueless of the situation that I had stumbled into, and continually made myself the fool until they tried to arrest me. They tried to imprison me, and they did. But the special forces got me out away from the secret police, got me on the plane, and then I just had my daughter. And at that point I realized this is serious business. This is above my pay grade. I'm done with this. I'm not going to jeopardize my anything anymore. This was a long time ago, and if for anyone listening that's of Russian descent or my students and my friends that are in Russia right now, it's not an indictment. It was an old situation. Look at American history. We've made huge mistakes, and 10 and 20 and 30 years ago, we were of a different political acumen than we are now. So it's not an indictment of Russia by any means. This is old history. One of the characteristics about Russian training is that it's completely decentralized, so that every school and club you go to had a different sambo.
Okay. That
way, the enemy would never know how the military was being trained. They would only know that group, how that unit was being trained. So there was no standardization of how to train. It was only success in competition. You would think that martial art isn't a large community. For instance, when I was on the U.S. team, I became a national champion through a pool of 5,000 athletes. The Soviets, in order to get to Soviet national championships, to put this in context, they never liked going to world championships. They thought it was a waste of their time because they could spend that time training and competing against quality competition in their own country. So they had this phrase, first in the world, seventh in Siberia. And the seventh string is what they sent to world championship, because for them, they had 10,000 athletes per weight class, per age division competing.
Damn.
So imagine the pool of competitors compared to the international community. When I went over there, I was a world silver medalist. I lost to my Russian counterpart. So I went over there thinking, I'm a silver medalist. I'm going to do all right. I was cremated. He threw me like a rag doll on hardwood and marble and ground. And they put me up with 60 and 70-year-old men, and I was in my early 20s.
Wow.
They put me in with the Russian national boxing team, and they set me up with the girls who were just starting out. I'm like, dude, you need to understand, I'm a grown man. You can't, I don't want to hurt this girl. And the whistle would go, and she put more leather on me than anyone I had experienced in this country. It was like being hit like a pincushion.
It's so funny. That exact thing happened to me in Kendo. Just got beat like a rug after making a speech about how, hey, I don't hit girls.
Yeah, it's a humbling experience, right?
I'll say. Second only to having like someone really old do it to you, you know?
Exactly. And the guy that set me up with was nicknamed Dusty, and the joke is that he ate grass and lived in the woods. He was so old. Thanks.
Yeah,
I thought that they were, just trying to embarrass the American by putting him with the old guys and the girls. No, I got toasted. That's unacceptable to me. So at that point, I realized I couldn't train more or harder because I trained 68 hours a day as a professional, and with my virility, there's no way that these geriatrics should be training harder than me. So I stopped what I was doing and I revisited what they were doing. I looked at how they were training. Okay, I'm going to model exactly what they're doing. And that's what I did. I had just started moving like them. Fortunately for me, the language barrier acted as an accelerator because I couldn't get distracted. I could only reproduce what I saw, how I saw them moving. So I didn't have any, I learned inductively, and I learned only through physical rehearsal. If you think about how a lot of people train, they look at a technique, they see it done once or twice, and then they say, well, okay, I'll go, I can do that now, I got this. You don't have it. It's going to take you about 10,000 repetitions.
Right.
So that for me, I had no choice in those 10 grand. I had to. So that's how I accelerated, and eventually they had me start teaching in Russia, which caused a huge stink. Who's this American teaching us our martial art? And that led to a lot of political opposition too. But the conclusion of what I had learned in Russia, don't think that went unnoticed in America. I became the black sheep. I was slapped in the middle of the mat as the U.S. national coach from the international president who was an American. I was slapped on the face as a traitor because I had left to go to train in Russia rather than staying in America and figuring out a superior way to do it.
Wow.
Yeah, he said I was a traitor. And at the time, you have to understand, I was a 20-something kid, and so I was enraged, and I thought, I'm gonna take this guy to the ground. But what I came to realize is that it was a cultural collision. That Americans are incredible educational entrepreneurs. If they see a problem, they will sit down and they will come up with a solution to it. That's a huge cultural attribute. However, it's an impediment to the degree that you don't consider the work that's already been done. Mm-hmm. So if you're resistant to another culture, you've just removed the possibility of learning from that culture and not reinventing the wheel. So we were being destroyed internationally. I was the U.S. coach for several years, and the disparity between the level of competition was so great that it was laughable. I'm like, you know what? This is not working. We are not efficient enough. How do they move so much better than us? They embarrass us on the mats. And that's when I decided that I would litter them with requests to train until they answered me. And that happened to be simultaneous to where they started to expand those cultural programs. The stress physiology was not something that I anticipated, but it's instantly what I concentrated upon. The reason that they are able to move with such precision is because they slice time smaller than we do. It did. So they saw increments of movement, saw so many more increments of movement that it looks like they were able to do more, but it's because they saw it so much earlier in development. So if you only have 3 chunks of movement when you see a technique occur, and they see 30 chunks, then that slicing is what gives them 10 times the movement or response speed. Right.
And let alone each of those moments, they're each fork in the road, right?
Exactly. But to get to that time slicing, they needed to have the sang-froid composure to be able to not be emotionally attached to what was happening or sympathetically aroused by it. So if you get enraged, there's no way you're going to see anything. You literally gain tunnel vision.
Right, and the physiology backs that up. You know what I mean, about narrowing of focus, and
that's what my new book is about. And it takes a look at the sympathetic arousal, what it does to the human body, and how we've neglected the parasympathetic tone, which allows us to perform well. So you have fight or flight reflex, and we've reinforced that, we've strengthened that, we've perfected it, and the American war engine is the most efficient and lethal military force that has ever existed in human history. And yet, we have never had a higher suicide rate among our soldiers any time in history.
What was the last statistic? Like almost one a day now in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Exactly. And now let's look at the mortality rate. The biggest killer of law enforcement, military, and fire rescue, the biggest killer is not fire, it's not bullets, they're not knives, it's stress-related disease. And the mortality rate, the average lifespan is 54. For all of them, all three, it's the same number. 54. Wow. Why is that? And it happened to, this is what, the tools that I learned to keep my composure on the mat, I didn't know was a catharsis, a life's catharsis of trying to understand why my father was so enraged. So looking deeper into the science, I had to develop a way of training that equaled, when I say training, I mean conditioning, strength and conditioning, not just technical acquisition and refinement. So we have skill development, and then you have attribute development. That, if I can establish terms first, I not only needed a way of developing and acquiring skills, discipline skills, but I also needed a way of strength and conditioning that would keep me underneath this threshold of excessive stress because of what happened to my body and because of what happens to my mind when I face excessive stress. I was the perfect solution to my father's situation. He gave birth to the answer to his problem. It's such a beautiful metaphor what had happened. So in researching more of the stress physiology, when I left Russia, I took it upon myself to start pouring myself into the textbooks. I went to the university, and my undergrad was philosophy, and from there my master's became in sport, and my postgrad work was working on understanding connection, which eventually became its own discipline, psychoneuroimmunology and the neuroscience to support it. But the impact of stress upon our health, not just our fitness, but I'm saying this, the impact of stress upon our health became my focus point as I started working more and more with these federal agencies, special operations units, and fire rescue departments. Martial artists tend to be prima donnas, and I'm not afraid to tell them that. I work with all level fighters. For me, martial art is a great sport, and I think it's a discipline that is very important to our children, and that nobody wants to fight, but somebody needs to remember how.
Right.
But that said, people take it too seriously. It's much too serious of a topic to be taken seriously.
Agreed.
So I don't.
But I think it's important to have a huge. Only someone with a huge ego would see fighting and say, A, I can do that. B, I can excel at that.
Well,
So I think it's like being an artist. You need to have an ego to go to the dance in the first place.
I agree with you. I would only define terms and say that it takes a strong ego to defeat a big ego.
Agreed.
It's how my teacher described it, and it was almost giving me permission because of my misunderstanding of Buddhism that I learned in university. I learned about Buddhism. I didn't study Buddhism, if you follow.
Okay, I do.
So for me, I thought ego was the problem, and I needed to extinguish myself. I didn't realize, no, what you need to do is you need to strengthen yourself so that you can defeat the overinflation of it. And that gave me permission to develop my mental capacity, develop my body without any worry of people thinking it's vanity or that I'm shallow because I concentrate so heavily upon the body. For me, this is my church. I cannot improve my mental and spiritual and emotional capacity unless I do it through my movement. So,
what was it Bruce said about the art of expressing the human body, right?
It's a beautiful way of putting it.
Yeah. So in a moment of pause here, I want to just interject. There's a great book out called Deep Survival by Lawrence Gonzalez.
Great.
Talks about a lot of the physiology of fear that we were just discussing.
It's a great book.
You were familiar with it?
Except for like 2011, 2012, my library is full.
Okay.
Good. A lot of the more recent stuff, I'm still trying to keep up on it, but it's spalling now. There's so much research going on that it's actually exceeded my ability to track it, and that's what I do for a living, is track this research and try and nudge it, and as well as learn from my contemporaries.
There's such an explosion of it all now.
Right, because we understand that the real opponent is excessive stress. It's not you don't ever actually fight another individual. You fight your resistance to the ability to respond to what's happening. If you could accurately, in the present moment, see what was happening and remain calm to it, you're never in any danger. But we can't see it. Just like we can't, with the way that we're encoded as predators to see a face and for us to, our attention to be captured by it. If something in a rock face, in a rock wall, has the image of a face, our brain as a predator is hardwired to reflex as soon as we recognize the arrangement that's face-like. So in the same way, when our nervous system perceives an emotional or symbolic threat, it has the same level of arousal as if it were a true physical threat. So even though we practice martial art, and we've stepped on the map, everyone needs the mental tools that are in martial art. Because everyone that is exposed to any type of perceived threat has the arousal within them, the sympathetic arousal, that leads to the number one killer in the world, stress-related disease.
And it's tough to differentiate. I think Kat and I were just talking about this, about life being stress, and even the dilation of a pupil is in reaction to some stress, i.e. a bright light being shined or whatever. So there's good stress and bad stress. Unfortunately, I think we are overwhelmed with bad.
Well, and this comes into a very important topic, and especially when it's in relation to fitness, that you have a spectrum of stress. On one end, you have eustress, EU stress, and the other end, you have distress. In the middle of that is a very specific line. It changes from day to day. It changes based upon your sum total stress load of your nutrition, your sleep patterns, your emotional engagements, your relationships, your interpersonal conflicts. If you live in a magnetic field, if you live near high power lines, if you live in mold, if you live in an arid environment, if you're dehydrated, all of these things based upon our proprioception impact our total sum stress load, some more than others. Mm-hmm. So on one day to the next, that line moves. But it's a very specific line. Underneath the line is adaptive stress. So anything that you experience up into that one little point at one very specific dot, you adapt to and become a stronger, better human being from the increase of it. Everything above that dot, everything beyond that line for that day, catabolizes and cannibalizes. Every new increment of stress above that dot destroys you and accelerates the aging process. So I came to want to understand, where's that dot? Where's that damn dot? How do I track it? Because if I can measure it and track it, I can progress it. But if it's not trackable and measurable, then I could produce an unpredictable and potentially undesirable result from any type of training that I do. For me, it's much more catastrophic mentally and physically when I step across into distress. So I need to be accurate. When I compete, like at 2010 World Games, I had 9 fights in 24 hours. I won the gold medal. I won 5 gold medals. And when I came out of it, when I came away from it, I had a dislocated jaw, a broken orbit, 3 dislocated cervical discs, a dislocated rib, a crushed peroneal nerve, and a subluxated ankle, which eventually developed bone spurs.
Mm.
I was held together by bubblegum and duct tape, man. That was the best training of my life.
Yeah.
But the point is that it's excessive stress has a much more catastrophic impact on me than others, which is why I'm OCD about this dot. What is the threshold of performance and adaptation?
Mm-hmm.
And I researched and I found it. And it's something identifiable. It's something that's trackable and measurable from day to day. And it directly correlates to heart rate maximum. Your heart is a feedback mechanism because it is muscle. So the muscular tone of the heart can be tracked to know the recovery of the rest of the body, because it's an analog for everything else that's happening. So when you know what the heart rate maximum for you is that day, it's not formulaic. We use a formula often, a mathematical formula, but it's inaccurate. You have a very specific heart rate maximum right now, and you need a special machine called an omega wave machine in order to know the exact heart rate maximum. But the general number formula is 220 minus your age. It's so inaccurate. It's so inaccurate. But 220 minus your age is your heart rate maximum. So anything that rapidly approaches or exceeds that dot, that number, is unusable and inadaptive. So let's say you go to a high-intensity interval training program using heavy weight and fast movements and explosive exercises, and you exceed your heart rate maximum, but you have another 50 reps that you want to pull off. First of all, anything over heart rate maximum is, by definition, sympathetic arousal. It dumps into your bloodstream the whole chemical cocktail we're all familiar with. And that quickly erodes your ability to focus on technique, mechanics, by definition. You cannot hold mechanics once you're in sympathetic arousal. So at heart rate maximum, it is impossible for you to have good form, first of all. Second of all, the only ability for you to exceed heart rate maximum, what takes you up to heart rate maximum is your conditioning. What takes you beyond heart rate maximum is hormones. You can't adapt to have stronger hormones. So any exercise you do above heart rate maximum is junk rep. It's useless exercise. It's fitness masturbation. It may feel good, but it reproduces nothing. So I wanted to find, okay, if that's useless exercise above there, I don't want to waste my energy. I want to be able to walk the line of heart rate maximum. So the Russians had developed a whole host of recovery mechanisms, recovery tools and strategies to recover from heart rate maximum, which is defined as with the term resilience. Your ability to recover from excessive stress is resilience. Your ability to resist excessive stress is toughness. In our country, we focused on mental toughness, but it washed out the 85% of the people that weren't already tough. And that's what most of our military, most of our federal law enforcement, a lot of our fitness and sports training is all about being tough. Just tough it out. What does that mean? It means don't fail. How do I not fail? Tough it out. Circular definition.
Right.
But how do I not tough it out? If I scream, get tough, be tough at somebody, it's meaningless. Because what I'm saying is don't fail. Okay, how do I not fail? You need the ability to recover from when you fail in order to resist failure, because it's a sliding scale. So the recovery mechanisms are defined by heart rate maximum. What can I do to get my heart rate down? This led me into working as a consultant for movement therapy at a neurobehavioral clinic in Pennsylvania. And I designed movement programs for brain damaged and mentally ill children because of the level of sympathetic arousal that they experience due to trauma in their bodies and the damage that had been done to them neurologically. I took the tools that I learned in Russia and I applied it in this clinic over 18 months with dramatic results. And then we took those results, the psychologist and I, and we did studies on the local university students in order to see, does this translate over into the general population? It did. So now I can teach these skills, make these skills repeatable, even without physical exercise. I took those and I started training my athletes that way, training my soldiers and my cops that way. And I saw increased decisionary speed and increased discretionary skills, discretionary ability, the ability to discern, let's say, a shoot, don't shoot scenario. I was improving their ability to make better decisions because of how they could recover from excessive stress. That childhood, that first question that you asked, is everything. Mm-hmm. If it weren't for that initial catalyst, I would have never. Who would want to go around and try and study these different varied disciplines at the cost of their face? Fortunately, my wife is nearsighted, so she doesn't know what
So tell me, how does all of this feed into TACFIT and CST?
Thank you for asking that. TACFIT is a fitness system that is designed upon increasing your recovery rate. So it's high intensity, meaning that it's designed to bring you up to heart rate maximum. How fast, the quantitative tracking in TACFIT, what you record in, what you progress in TACFIT, are not the weights, not the repetitions, not the speed or the duration. It's how fast you recover your heart rate. We need a quantitative metric. So you have a point value. You have to achieve the minimum point value, but you have to do it by being able to recover back to 80% heart rate maximum or less. If you can't recover back to 80% heart rate maximum or less and achieve the base standard, then you don't pass. So the focus isn't on power output like CrossFit. The focus is upon adaptive and usable technique. You can go as fast as your technique can hold it. And by definition, above heart rate maximum, you've exceeded your ability to hold technique. So anything that you do above that, for me, is useless. Perhaps you'll perform more, but you won't perform better. That was my strength and conditioning formula to prepare me to fight. Because I wanted to be able to recover. I didn't need to have greater power. So what if I could hit harder? What does that mean if I can't hit well?
Right. Or last to the second round.
Exactly. So if I expend all of my energy because of emotional over-arousal and my conditioning is gone, then I'm useless. So my fitness is actually a detriment to me if I only train above or exceeding heart rate maximum. If my fitness is based upon exceeding heart rate maximum, I've actually decreased my ability to perform in a combative sport. And that's what translated over into the federal agencies that I now train. And that's what I just proven. I just got my statistics. I crunched all the numbers back. This is the first official federal agency training academy that piloted a TAC-FIT only PT conditioning for their entire class. We tracked it with before and after PEBs. They refused to do any other validation study other than the previous exam that they did, which is push-ups, sit-ups, 1.5-mile run, sit and reach test. They refused to change the test, and I said, fine, you keep your test. We won't do your type of push-ups. We won't do any sit-ups. We won't do sit and reach flexibility, which is ridiculous. And we're certainly not going to do a 1.5-mile run for training because the average pursuit distance is 70 meters to 100 meters. It's not 1.5 miles. You need to be able to sprint, not jog. So you keep those, and we're still going to defeat the prior scores. And we're going to recover faster. So the results came back on June 11th, and I crunched all the numbers. We proved to be, I'm going to give you the exact numbers because I am so OCD about this. So over the prior classes, we lost an additional 5 pounds of weight. We got 7 push-ups stronger than the prior classes. We got 10 sit-ups stronger than the prior classes. 1 minute and 33 seconds faster without doing any of the 1.5 mile runs.
Wow.
We lost an additional 1.6% body fat over the prior, and we gained a half an inch of flexibility over the prior classes. And on top of that, and here's the clincher. This is a big one. Never before happened in the entire training academy history of the U.S. Marshal Service. 0 injuries for the entire class. 0 injuries.
That is formidable.
The average class has 31% injuries. So 31, almost 1 out of 3 people in a basic academy was injured from training. You wait, because this was the Justice Department that did this. Now, the U.S. Marshals are part of the Justice Department. So you wait, what's going to happen? This is why I was so excited to talk to Pat. When I saw her, she's going, "You're glowing." Yeah. This is years of work, and I have to say that I'm elated because of the implications it has that have nothing to do with their fitness metrics. I don't care about what those tests. What I do care about is the increased decisionary skills that it gives, discretionary skills, increased decision-making speed, increased longevity because of their ability to recover from excessive stress will improve their longevity, since their average mortality rate is 54 nationally for federal law enforcement agencies. And it will increase their quality of life because they don't live in excessive stress and have to medicate with relaxation, self-medicate with relaxation techniques or substances. Mm-hmm. This is huge, man.
Yeah. It's amazing. And such a validation of all that you're about, right?
I know. I'm sorry, man. I'm like a peacock with my feathers right up. I'm so excited because this has taken years to actually go through it, and the people involved, especially the senior inspector, deserves all of the credit because he put up with all of the institutional resistance to this. He prepared all of the instructors so that they could replicate all of the training programs. And all of the institutional culture that he had to shift as a result of the American culture, our culture being based upon toughness, not resilience. Just tough it out. We're not as tough as we used to be. That's why, and all of that had to stop. And it came down to the shoulders of one individual, a private contractor. It was that individual who stood up and said, no, we need to change. We need to take care of our agents. And in every single unit and agency that I've worked with, there has to be that leader who's willing to stick their neck out. And when it comes to jiu-jitsu, literally, in order to say, this needs to change. We need to improve the health and performance of our people. I'm excited, man.
Yep. So TACFIT and CST, they're a fitness system, not a martial arts system.
Right.
Okay.
Well, if you look at old school martial art, when the MMA craze hit, we had a lot of classical baggage that we had to get rid of because, we didn't have any checks and balances to test the efficacy of what was learned 1,000 years ago. This is how you destroyed an attacker on the battlefield. Yeah, well,
right.
He didn't have a gun.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to be this close in order to shoot me. So
right.
The warfare has changed. And not only that, but we have changed. Our psychology has changed. Our population density has changed. The current day criminal is more terrorist than burglar. He will be so pernicious that he will stalk and look for an ideal victim and avoid at all costs anyone who will mount any counter resistance to his intentions. So we've, like developing cockroaches, super bugs, we've developed a perniciousness in our criminal attitudes that exceeds any type of combative engagement we've had historically. Our martial art has to evolve as well.
Right, and it's sort of slowly happening with things like JKD and a lot of the MMA stuff, and it's bringing, I think, like UFC brings martial arts into people's homes, and they can kind of get their head around it.
It does, but it's made punk jitsu out of an art form.
And I love that.
The unfortunate part is, I was sitting at the beach with my kids and my wife here in Bellingham, and I had this, I swear to God, I wish I would have had my phone nearby so that I could record this. Somebody stumbled over somebody's girlfriend, and they stood up and they started posturing and bumping greasy chests. And I just said, kids, come on, let's move out of here. Because I'm not having anything to do with all of this bravado. And the one guy says, you better back down. The other guy responds, no, I'm not. You better back down. I have 8 TVs in my house, and they're playing the UFC 24 hours a day.
Wow.
That was... Like, wow, if I had only known that's what you need to do, you just need osmosis of playing the fights all day long in order to train. I went the slow learners route.
Yeah, well, it just reminds me, we were at Barnes & Noble, and I saw a book called Martial Arts Made Easy, and I thought, I've been wasting all this time.
Right. I should write a book, Martial Arts Made Difficult.
That's
the way I learned it. So the MMA movement happened. In our cleanse of the classical mess, we jettisoned out the conditioning approaches that were valid and and evolutionarily survivable. The conditioning methods are always contemporary because what we're dealing with is stress physiology. The details, the tactics, and the techniques evolve based upon the mode of combat or the theater of engagement or what weapons are chosen. So the conditioning methods we jettisoned, unfortunately, and that we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, let's use our popular method of exercise for martial art, which is competitive bodybuilding and powerlifting. Those are sports. Powerlifting exercises are designed to increase your ability to do powerlifting. Bodybuilding is designed to increase the physical aesthetics of your feature up on stage. So, yes, you do have byproducts of increased strength and conditioning and power, granted. byproducts. There is some transferability, about 15%, and through 15 degrees in a range of motion. However, I can tell you, man, that I know who is going to fail my exam as soon as they step into my class. They're 80% of the time, it's the most athletic guys in the class. In the back of the class, because they just realize, wait a minute, why do I have to do all these strange movements? And what's all this shaking and heart rate stuff? And I see their numbers drop off because they're trained for the wrong fight. They're trained for the wrong sport. So I have to get underneath the institutional culture of that. When we say TAC Fit and CST are not martial art, they evolved from martial art. They're the conditioning aspects of martial art, fortified with modern science, and made and distilled down into the most universally essential aspects. Make sense?
Yeah. I've heard you describe the program as fitness with a purpose.
Yeah.
Does that pretty much sum it up?
Yeah, that's the purpose. I want people to start asking the question, well, what do you mean purpose? And then the response is, well, what are you fit for? What do you mean?
Right.
What do you want to be fit for? I can ask you how you want to look. Right. When you say fitness, you're always saying fit for something. Well, I want to be able to, so you want to be able to do this. That's what we should train for. You want to go and you want to do your kayak ride. You want to go hiking with your kids. You want to not be in pain anymore. You want to get your arms over your shoulders. You want to be able to stand up without walking up your thighs.
Yeah.
There's always a very specific, I want to see my abs again. Okay, that's not being fit, but we can decrease your body fat.
Right.
And as soon as we say purpose, we've taken it away from the commercial programs, because we're not saying this is fitness. We're not saying P90X or Insanity or TRX or kettlebells or CrossFit, or we're not saying no thing is fitness, no system is fitness. It's always absolutely individualized and specific to even the day. There's no such thing as fitness. The general fitness does not exist.
Well, I like what you had said, or I had heard you say about be more prepared than the challenges you face.
Right.
Yeah. A certain amount of training will get you through those first 2 or 3 minutes, but then you got a guy that just wants to go to the ground, and that suddenly becomes a protracted chess match. And
well, my coach used to say, you haven't been into a fight until it's more than you can handle. And that had a huge impact on me. Most of my life I couldn't handle. I had no tools. I had no frame of reference. I just thought I was incompetent. I didn't realize I was just ill-prepared. So now, let's forecast. What's the worst-case scenario? And let's train for that. Because people say, well, you're going to perform how you train. No, you're not. That's very optimistic. You're not going to perform how you train. The best that you can do on the mat is the worst you've done in training. That's the most you can aspire to. Whatever you've done, the worst you've done in your training, that's the best you can hope for. Anything else is just luck and timing. Right. You can't train for luck and timing. You can pray for divine providence, and sometimes that helps, but most of the time is, your divine providence is you have the opportunity to prepare.
Well, it's like the difference between training for like a pistol disarm and then having someone shove a gun in your face. Big difference.
I remember, I don't want to say names, but I remember I was at university and this one agent came to teach us when a gun's pointed at your head, you reach up, when you grab a hold of the barrel, you depress the safety. Then you hit the slide release and you pull the slide toward you, disengaging the slide, right? And then once the slide's off, you hit the magazine release and then you hit them with the slide. And I'm like, okay, hold on a second. let me point this handgun at you, and you tell me what kind of handgun this is.
Right, and where the safety is, and where the slide release is. Because
it's different from one to another.
Absolutely.
And second of all, you're going to do all that? He goes, yeah, let me show you how to do it. I'm like, can I load the gun?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of theory, man, and I don't care what style that you train in, as long as you can keep your composure, and you train well, you're going to be effective. It's not what style you train in. It's do you have access to the skills under stress, and when you don't, how fast can you recover back to access? Because you have to seize back from the clutches of that startle response, the basal reflexes. You have to take back from that so that you can get to the point where you have usable, conscious skills again. What do? How do you prepare for that? And that's what I focused on because of my background.
And that's what's fascinating about in doing the research for this talk. The amount you stress recovery was really heartwarming, for want of a better word, because so often that sort of gets glossed over.
We're walking wounded, man.
Oh, I know.
Most of us don't realize that we're screaming our wounds, because you know what? The bottom line is, if we have to suck it up and not admit our pain, then we will, because we must. There are kids, there are country, it's our world. I mean, we will do the things that we need to do in a crisis, regardless of what's happening inside us. However, what if there were a way that we didn't have to suck it up and live with the pain and live with the wounds? What if we didn't have to do that? Okay, I get it. You have fantastic retroactive techniques and therapies and technologies to deal with post-traumatic stress. Thank you. What do we do proactively? What do we do so that doesn't happen? I get it. You've developed great methods for after it has, but that's like treating the disease. What preventative measures do we do in order to fortify our health? And the same thing applies to stress.
These days, I think modern man is inherently unprepared for either fight or flight. Because most of us aren't, if a lot of us get to the gym twice a week and walk on a treadmill, we consider ourselves as active.
Well, but can I put it in the context of my background?
Sure.
With stress physiology, is that the 77% of the stress-related diseases that develop are not due to actual expression of excessive stress from like facing violence. People think that, okay, he's going to develop some type of stress-related problem or illness because he's constantly in a fight. Those people who are constantly in fights are probably going to live longer than the people who are in road rage that don't fight. Now, before a listener gets irate about what I just said, I'm not endorsing fighting. What I'm saying is that there is a biological processing of the chemistry of fighting by fighting. We're designed to process the volatility, the toxic volatility of human violence by fighting. We evolved that way. So if we don't fight, then that chemistry resides and becomes a toxic waste dump.
Right.
So I'm not endorsing fighting. But if you think about a very pedestrian approach to this, Fight Club was ingenious.
Agreed.
Because that addresses a problem. Those people, despite the level of physical violence, are probably going to live longer because of their sang-froid composure and the processing of the chemistry. The people that go to the treadmill and never get above 40% heart rate max, and they're watching the TV screen and they're reading their book and they're listening to their iPod and they're having their chat, and then they go have their little smoothie. I mean, it's all very how should I say, it's anesthetic. It's a hospital-like environment. It's sanitized of stress. Stress is what we need, and not as we don't need 2 or 3 hours of it in a health club. We need 20 minutes of it,
right?
And recover from it faster. We will. Even my physique has accelerated. The shorter I've made my workouts and the higher intensity of recovering from it. So I tried to shorten my my training duration without recovery and catabolized and ended up cannibalizing my own tissue. But to be anabolic is to have high intensity and recover from it a few times a week rather than 6 to 8 hours of this long, slow duration training. So you're absolutely right that we're ill prepared to deal with the toxicity of sympathetic arousal, of excessive stress, with the type of fitness that we do. It does nothing for us.
Well, two thoughts on that. Number one, there's the paradigm shift with quote-unquote fighters that most people's worst nightmare is someone in their face wanting to punch them. And when that becomes your norm, there's a shift, I think, that happens, where your day at the office is much different than mine, put it that way. And the other part of it is, the idea is how many times have you seen someone who's terribly out of shape and terribly obese, but they've got, America #1 kind of T-shirt on. It's like, wow, the dogs come to the gate, and you're not going to be a lot of help.
Well, there's a stress inoculation that allows you to deal with everything better, because though our movements only ever develop specifically, the nervous system, it develops generally, the general adaptive syndrome, the GAS. So as you develop your ability to recover from excessive stress in one sphere, you develop it in all spheres. Now there are noxious and novel stimuli, can, like new things and more powerful things than you've experienced, will push you into excessive stress. But for all of the things that you have exposed yourself to, high levels of stress, there's a carryover across that genre. So if you go into the office and somebody's belligerent in your face, your boss just has a emotional meltdown tantrum, and you've had your type of training, you're going to stand there and you'll shake your head and you'll say, I can appreciate your point of view. I can see you're very frustrated, and that must be very difficult right now. What can I do at this point to help you through this so that we can find a solution? And when other people see you do that, they look at you like, how in the hell did you remain so calm and talk to him like you were a counselor?
Right.
It's because I'm used to...
He wasn't trying to punch me in the face.
Right. Look at this. You see this face that you're looking at? This is not normal. This happened over years.
Yeah. So
I'm comfortable with somebody being emotionally perturbed, and that's why there's you can't become a bodyguard through classroom education.
Right.
You have to have been in a bit of stink in order to have alertness, awareness, and composure, which is what you need in order to protect somebody else rather than your own skin.
Sure. And no one likes a bouncer with shaky hands. You know what I mean?
No, well, nobody likes a trigger puller with shaky hands either.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed in looking over the videos of TacFit is that a lot of the people in the videos, granted you want to put your best foot forward, but they're already kind of physically fit. Is CST and TacFit a viable form of exercise for people just starting regular physical activity?
I would love if I could share more videos of the agencies and units that I train, because everybody thinks of cops and soldiers and firefighters as being in great shape, and that's probably because of the ones that they see. The entry-level recruit is in abysmal shape. And in more and more cases, and I understand that people are going to be upset with me about this, and if I lose contracts for saying this publicly, I'm okay with that. Even the instructors now, because of the level of excessive stress that they repeatedly undergo without recovery techniques, they're in the worst shape. So I worked for the federal government teaching TACFIT. They would send me from state to state to train the state and local police in tactical fitness, to understand the basic concepts of recovering from excessive stress through physical exercise. And brother, most of the instructors could not access the techniques because the exercise techniques. They couldn't access the exercise techniques because of the level of damage they incurred through excessive stress. The knees wouldn't move. The hips are damaged. The lower back hurts all the time. They've got neck stingers. They've got referred nerve pain down the left arm, sciatica. There's a laundry list of very, very common injuries and pains that excessive stress distorts into the body. So it was giving them access to, my training became giving them access to being able to exercise so that they could recover from stress. What you see are people who have come through the other end of the tube. What you don't see is that most people that I train are in abysmal shape. The stress has done to them now what genetics did to me as a child. They've accelerated their ages. They accelerated their aging. It has shifted them into fat storage because the metabolism is suppressed, and the body doesn't know what to do because the endocrine system's all gummed up. So even you can have the best nutrition in the world, which most people don't, but even if you have the best nutrition in the world, the type of movement that they're doing doesn't deliver the essential nutrients to the tissues that are literally being starved to death for it. Mm-hmm. So the average person is actually my target market. The elite operator, the world champion fighter, they tend to train in a way that they've learned to train, that they believe works, but they don't have any metrics for tracking whether that's correct or not. And if they do have metrics proving that they're progressing, which is rare, if they do have progressive metrics, what they're not looking at is career longevity. They're looking at winning the next fight. This is a sport, folks. Right. This is not a lifestyle. I'm concerned about career longevity. And when it comes to my cops, my soldiers, and my firefighters, I'm concerned about them getting home for a long time, not just tonight. Mm-hmm. I want them to get home tonight, and I will make sure that happens. But I want them to keep getting home until their great-grandkids start arriving. Right. So that my demographic is the average person, because the average person faces, in modern society, the same